Hey everybody, this is Matthew Soltesiak, and you're listening to Not the Same Old Lions podcast, part of the Minute Media Podcast Network. This season, it's all grit. I speak with a variety of guests and interview key players, gaining more insight on what makes this team go. The Detroit Lions are now in a new, grittier era, and we look beyond just the kneecaps when it comes to the analysis. Welcome to another episode. With the Detroit Lions on their bye this weekend, in this episode, we take a look at the first quarter of the season. Is this the team we were hoping for? Or do things look different than expected? What areas are giving us confidence, and where do we see concerns? We'll also take a look around the NFC North and see how the division rivals are looking. Let's get to it, Lions fans.
Hi, this is Corey Schlesinger with the Detroit Lions, and you're listening to Not the Same Old Lions podcast.
Joining me today is James Cook, senior sports writer for the Traverse City Record Eagle. You can also hear him on his podcast, The Get Around. That drops on Mondays. James, good to have you here.
Good to be here. Was able to get in a round of golf this week on the bye week.
Yeah, kind of strange with no football on Sunday. Tigers played on Saturday, so it left the schedule a little open. Of course, joining us is Coach Jerry Angers, former Michigan High School Coach of the Year, as well as Coach of the Week by the Detroit Lions. He's currently scouting and training director at Bull Rush Sports. Coach, did you go golfing?
No, I went. Actually, I rode my jet ski today, and I went to a college football game yesterday. So it wasn't bad. Wasn't a bad weekend.
All right, and I got out and did a hike today and caught some football before and after, and that is the Lions bye week. And now we waited a few extra days to record this because we wanted a little bit clearer picture or an updated picture of what the NFC North kind of looks like a quarter of the way in. And we basically are a quarter of the way because through 17 weeks or 18 weeks, 17 games, teams play more than, just 4 games each quarter, but some teams did play today. So we're pretty much at that quarter of the way through. Let's start with the Detroit Lions. They are 3-1 through 4 games. I think that's a record that all three of us kind of thought they were going to be at. I don't recall your guys' points. You'll let me know on this, but I didn't know exactly which game we were going to lose. I just had a feeling we would lose one because we played some really good teams. And again, you don't always know what a team's going to look like once the season starts. I mean, if you look around the NFL right now, there are some surprises in the affirmative category and surprises in the negative category. So, Coach, let's start with you. The 3-1 record, it's kind of what we expected. How you feeling about that?
I feel great. I mean, we could be 4-0, but a lot of people could be 4-0, or 5-0. So, we go back to, I still talk about that. The game against Tampa Bay, beating a team 3 times in less than a year is a tall task in the NFL. And, we kind of laid an egg on that. Of course, Coach Campbell's going to take the blame for that one because he says he screwed everything up and he didn't have the team ready and all those things. But the thing is, they bounced back, and then they, of course, we won a shootout last week against a team. We beat a team that we haven't been able to beat in 3 years under Campbell, and I think 6 or some years with Seattle. So happy with the 3-1. You go 3-1 every quarter, you're going to have a pretty good season. So one of the steps are out of the way.
I agree with that. James, how about you? How are you feeling after that 3-1 start?
I think it's pretty solid. I mean, they're definitely in the group of contenders for sure. I think any of us at the beginning of the season would have said 3-1 after 4 games. We would have been pretty happy with. I think we would have been counting the Bucks as one of those wins, maybe, and one of the losses to somebody else. But I think 3-1 is something that most people would have been pretty happy with.
All right, and I agree with Coach. It's one of those things, if we can go 3-1 every quarter, that's pretty phenomenal over the long haul, even if you work in a 3-2 or a 2-2 in there. And so, yeah, we're there. It wasn't always, exciting. It wasn't always like, wow, we blew a team out. And there's some we had to fight really hard for, but we're there. And there are some franchises out there that would love to be 3-1. I mean, some are like 1-3 or 1-4, and nobody expected them to be trying to dig out of that hole at this point. Well, let's take a look and see where the team ranks statistically. All right, I know you guys have dived into this as well. And let's preface this with the Seattle game changed these rankings a little bit. It gave a boost to the offense and a detriment to the defense a little bit in some categories. But the offense right now, their per game average is 4th in total yards, 7th in passing yards, 6th in rushing, and 7th in points scored. Now, obviously, that explosion we saw in Seattle helped that because a lot of people thought it was a slow start for the Lions offense. James, after 4 games, how you feeling about the offense?
I think the offense is fine, and I think it'll only get better, barring injury, of course. I think Tim Patrick will continue to be more and more of a threat on the outside for him, which gives them that extra wide receiver that they've been clamoring for. I think even as the season goes on, you maybe see a little bit more of Vaki at running back, just to give Gibbs and Montgomery a little bit of a spell here and there, so they're not leaning as heavily on those 2 guys, given how much they run the ball. So I mean, on the offense, I really don't have a whole lot of worries. Ragnow's injury, I don't think is long term. Mahogany's going to be back here pretty soon to give him some depth on the interior line. So I just don't really have a whole lot of worries. You're going to have Isaiah Williams coming back too fairly soon. That gives him that even 4th or 5th wide receiver, depending on how you view Khalif Raymond.
All right, and that going into the performance in that Seattle game probably calmed some worries from some people that saw early in the season. Coach, a lot of the same returning players, same returning coaches. It was a little bumpy to start the season in some people's eyes, right? We didn't put up 45 points a game, which again isn't realistic. But what are you seeing out of this offense through those first 4 weeks and the differences in the different games?
Well, I think balance has been the big thing. Our running backs are neck and neck in everything they do, whether they're scoring touchdowns, running. I think Gibbs has 11 receptions, which is totally awesome. We had to get Laporta healthy. We saw that in the first couple games. It was a little nerve wracking. St. Brown didn't have a great first game, but of course he comes back and lights it up after that. And, J-Mo has been a surprise, not a surprise. We're just happy that we knew what we got is doing what he is doing right now, which he's going to continue doing those explosive plays. You guys are right about Patrick. I think he's a great fit for us. The red zone was a big concern. We took care of that last week. And I think that comes from when you have all your weapons together. And again, when we want to put our will on people and decide, hey, this is what we're going to do. You better stop us. You can't stop us. And I think that's the biggest thing. And of course, the trick plays have all set into. So, you're just seeing a lot of different things with them trying to figure out, how we're going to use each and every one of them. And again, people got to understand, from a fan wise, there's going to be a hot hand and you're going to ride that hot hand. And those are the ones that are going to produce in those games, and the other ones are going to trickle in a little bit of effect and a little bit of plays. But Laporta's not going to have 11 catches every game, and St. Brown's not going to have 11 catches every game, and J-Mo's not going to have 4 explosive plays every game, and Gibbs is not going to carry the ball 25 every play, and Monty can't carry the ball. We would have 197 offensive plays, and we would score 675 touchdowns. Not going to happen. But long as we continue to score in the 30s, we'll be happy. So I'm pleased with the development, and I think it's going to get better going into the Dallas game.
All right, and like we said, with the 7th in points scored in the league on average, we're taking the average. That last game against Seattle probably calmed a lot of those fears. We saw the creativity in the play calling, a lot of great things to excite there, and a lot of completed passes, completed plays, whether it was running or throwing. They got in the end zone. They didn't stall out. And so I think the offense, most fans, as well as us, feel like it's getting on track. And that includes the new pieces, which we'll get into a little bit more of those. Let's flip it over to the defense. Now, if you look, they're number 22 in yards allowed, 27th in the passing game, and 4th in rushing yards allowed. And again, that game against Seattle definitely added some things there. But that being said, they're still 10th in points allowed. And I think that might be the most important stat right there, is how many points they're giving up per game. Coach, I'll start with you on this. What are you seeing out of the defense? There's a lot of new moving pieces there. How are you feeling after 4 weeks?
Pretty good, other than, the penalties. But you know what? That's a rookie learning whether he can be handsy or not. That's a rookie getting calls against him because he's a rookie. And that's a rookie that plays the Detroit Lions and not the Kansas City Chiefs. I had to throw that one in there because everybody says the Chiefs get every call. But, some of the things I want to point out of 20 opportunities in lockdown this year, you have to have 20 opportunities or more in lockdown. We have 3 guys in the top 15 in the league. Let me say that again. We have 3 guys in the top 15 in the league in lockdown. That's Branch, Davis, and Anzalone. So we have a safety. That's one of the best lockdown guys. We have a corner. That's one of the best lockdown guys. And we have a linebacker. That's one of the best lockdown guys. That's huge. You got Kirby Joseph, 3 interceptions, tied for 3rd. Branch is the 9th best defender at preventing separation this season. In other words, when he's locking people around people, they don't separate from. So I think those are things that we have to look at, and what's going on that. And of course, we can talk defensive. We will talk about Hutch, and he leads the league in pressures, leads the league in sacks. But let's not forget, we surrounded Hutch with a lot of good bodies so that we could so everybody could see how good this guy actually is. And so I think those things are all going to come into play, in this next quarter, these next 4 games that are pretty tough, next 5 games, if you want to look at it that way. And so I think that's one of the biggest things we're gonna have to keep building on and keep getting better on. But take those little bit of pieces, and then the other guys start to fall in, and I'll talk about percentages and stuff on plays, on how many reps everybody's getting. So, but very pleased with it, and let's watch how much better we get by our next game against Dallas.
All right, and James, we're 4th in rushing, which I think we picked up where we left off last year, so it's got to make us feel good. 27th in passing yards. Is that concerning you, knowing that we're 10th in points allowed? What are your thoughts on that, and anything else you want to add about where the Lions are ranking in those defensive categories?
Well, like you said, it's similar to last year where they were suffocating against the run. And so that naturally is going to lead teams to throw the ball more, which is going to inflate your numbers as to what you give up passing when you're basically the other team is going to have to throw the ball. But when the other team has to throw the ball, they're playing into your hand and doing what you want them to do. And that's going to lead to opportunities. We've seen what Kirby Joseph does with those, and that just leads to fewer points. Taking the run game away from most teams, aside from some runs by Walker against Seattle, has, I think, mostly made teams kind of one-dimensional against the Lions, and they've come in with pass-heavy game plans.
That makes a lot of sense. And in that Seattle game, we didn't even bring all this points up that much, but that was the Lions' first game without a couple key guys on defense. Plus, Branch was out in addition to that on defense, and Coach had brought up that if Branch is in there, some things are going to happen a little differently. And so it is darn impressive that their rush defense is that good and has made people be that one-dimensional. So let's look at the impact of the rookies, because some teams need rookies to make an immediate impact more than others. And going in, we knew a couple things. Lions were not going to have a top 5 or top 10 pick, which means the odds of that rookie being impactful are lower. Plus, our roster has gotten so much deeper. So we have Terrion Arnold, who's been a starter since the beginning, defensive back. Enes Rakestraw, defensive back, who's battled some injury. And that was our 2nd-round pick. Jump into the 4th round, you've got Giovanni Manu and Sione Vaki. And then in the 6th round, Makai Wingo and Christian Mahogany. Now, Mahogany was out for a lot of training camp as well, so that slowed his progress. Coach, what are you seeing out of each of these players? What's your kind of overall feeling based on this draft class so far? Just 4 games in.
Oh, I'm excited about it. I mean, Rick Straw, he was, of course, hurt, so he hasn't been able to get many reps, which has hurt us a little bit. I still have no concerns at all with our rookie corner, Arnold, because I think he's a player. He's a competitor. He's going to keep working. He's going to keep better. This was actually probably a great bye week for him, because he's going to get his opportunity to probably work on some things on his own, as well as with the guys on it, not be so handsy or not grab as much or get his head around a little bit quicker. So I think those are big. The other guys were not. Wingo again. I talked about Wingo week 2, I think, of preseason. let's go over his percentages. First game he played 8% of the snaps. Second game he played 29% of the snaps. Oh, he must have did something well. Stack your reps. We talk about that all the time. Third game, 47% of the snaps. And then, of course, in the fourth game, he only had 29% out of the 90. So, the thing is, but you're seeing him with more packages where he's lining up on the outside and coming inside, starting to use his quickness, chasing guys down on the field. I think he's going to be that one. We have to replace Davenport. That was one of our concerns. Oh my God, do we need to go out and get a DM? We brought Davenport in for this reason to get pressure, and hopefully, he's going to be that guy that does that. So, from those guys, I think we're in pretty good shape with them. The other ones, I don't know about the offensive side of guys. I mean, now Williams is coming back, and Kurs Vikey's doing a great job on special teams. So, a pretty good draft class, and I think once Arnold and Wingo both reach their full potential, they're going to be talking about this draft class a lot. About, man, that was a great class for us.
All right, because obviously a couple of the guys they drafted were expected to be projects and not have an immediate impact. Some people may have thought that Sione Vaki would be more involved at this point, and I'm going to say I'm not surprised that he's not involved more because of the fact that it's early in the season and David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs are getting the job done. They're splitting their reps. And I think you'll see him involved more, though, later as a change of pace or to give rest to those guys. And you already talked about the special teams, the fake punt, the other things he brings. James, how are you feeling about these rookies? Is it okay that, we only have a couple guys that seem to be contributing a little bit more than the others? And is there any more love that you can give to Wingo that will help Coach Angers with his love affair for that player? Because we know that's one of his favorites.
I sent him a video that reinforced his love affair with Mekhi Wingo the other day. But yeah, I mean, this rookie class wasn't expected to do a whole lot aside from the corners, which obviously addressed a weakness for that team. And the fact that they only needed Rakestraw to play one snap last week, I think was very telling that Carlton Davis and Terrion Arnold are getting the job done. If you watch the early game, the London game this year, even Sauce Gardner's getting called for a bunch of pass interferences and holdings. It seems to be up across the league this year. I think maybe the league kind of wants a little more high scoring games, and teams playing that too high safety shell is counteracting that. So you're seeing more and more defensive pass interference calls against secondaries around the league. It's not just a Terrion Arnold thing.
Well, that's good to hear because a lot of people have been pretty upset about the Terrion Arnold pass interference calls, and as a learning process. And I think we've already broke this down in previous episodes, which is he's not out of position. He's not getting beat. He's just got to work on some technique. And that is gives you a lot of optimism. And like you said, this might be a perfect time for that bye week. Yeah.
And his positioning has been great. He is right in the receiver's back corner pocket all the time. So you can't ask for a whole lot more. It's just making a little bit of contact here and there. And some of those is where you're seeing a lot more this season, I think, where receivers are initiating that contact and then getting that call where I don't think they necessarily should be. So it's something they're going to have to adjust to. He may have to change his game a little bit, but the positioning, the footwork, all that stuff that you want out of a cornerback is there. I mean, he is a guy who is going to be glued to his guy.
All right, well, let's transition away from the rookies' impact and how they're looking so far. And again, there's others who have not yet made an impact, but still could as the season goes on, and lots of things to keep an eye on with that. But let's look at the biggest surprises so far. James, we'll start with you, then we'll go to Coach. What's one thing that's been like a really big surprise for you for the Lions?
Wingo playing this much. As a 6th round pick, I didn't, and with the other players that they have in this rotation at defensive line, I didn't, him playing this much is a surprise. I knew he had the potential and everything, but injuries to Davenport to Broderick Martin have opened that door a little bit, and he's made a lot with it. Brandon Joseph last week played a very good game at strong safety in place of Brian Branch. So, that's one of those things where that was one of those positions we were concerned about coming into the season, was the depth at safety. And I think Brandon Joseph's play last week kind of alleviates that to a bit. I mean, you didn't notice him on the field, which is good because he's not doing anything wrong. He wasn't getting burnt. He was making tackles, and there's just not a whole lot bad to say about that game. And they obviously had a lot of faith in him. He played 99% of the snaps.
And he did not end up on somebody else's highlight reel. That is a great point. Coach, what are you seeing out of Wingo? We already kind of talked about him. Are you surprised how much he's contributing already this quickly to the team? And then you can talk about Brandon Joseph as well.
Yeah, well, I think that part of that is I thought he was going to get some reps. I knew he's going to be one of those guys that they're going to use him in pieces and parts and things that, to not put so much pressure on him. The Davenport injury definitely has probably helped that out a little bit. So I think that's why he's getting a little bit more reps from that, but he can also play inside and outside, even though he's we'll call him a short, squatty guy, but he's quick, he's fast, he can run. And I think, his athleticism took over, and, a lot of these guys fall to these, fifth and sixth rounds because of an injury their senior year, or they miss, but the thing with him, and I go back because we talked about preseason, what he did last year after his season, he got hurt, missed all those games during the season, and worked himself back to play in his bowl game so he could have one more shot with his boys, with his brothers, with his teammates. And that's why he's a Lion, guys. That's why he's a Lion, and that's why he's going to play for us, because he could have said, I'm just going to sit out, I'm going to get ready for the draft. No, I want to play one last game with my teammates. And so I think that, with the Davenport injury, with his athleticism, with his attitude, with his work ethics, and what he's done, it's huge for us. And so I just think it's a bonus. I hate to see him getting reps because Davenport's injured, but I'll touch base on, while we're talking about that, Pascal played 59% of the reps on the last game, and Levi played 62% of the reps in the last game. And Pascal played only 28% week one, 28, 27, and 31%. So there's some guys stepping up. Hopefully, I didn't see what his PFF grade was, but so I think those guys are kind of, maybe it's a group of players that have to take over for the injury to Davenport. But as long as we get production for two or three of them, that injury won't be as big. So I think that's a positive thing for us.
Well, yeah, I mean, you could put Pascal and Anzarike in that category of surprises. They have stepped up when needed, and they're making their presence felt even more than they have in previous seasons, and that's huge to make up for those injuries. Let me pose this to you guys, and these are two names everybody knows: Aiden Hutchinson and Jamison Williams. Mm-hmm. We're not surprised that they're on the team and they're contributing, but all training camp we heard Hutchinson looks like he's going to another level, but we didn't see any of it because he wasn't playing. We saw it in practice, but then we also heard during training camp that Jamo's taking steps, and we're seeing he's taken some really big steps. It looks like he's become that number 2 receiver the Lions were hoping for. So, James, are you surprised by how much of a step these two appear to have taken from last year, or does it just seem like a natural trajectory for you?
Yeah, I think it is a natural trajectory. I mean, we were expecting a jump from Jamison Williams, just being how his first 2 seasons in the league came about. Missing so much of the first season with his injury, missing a chunk of the second season with the suspension. I think we were expecting the normal second year bump that you see out of a receiver in his third year, and we've seen that for sure. With Hutchinson, it's kind of been a straight line progression. He just keeps getting better and better and better, and it just keeps going up. I mean, I think he leads the NFL in pressures, and it's not even close. I think he has like a double-digit lead after 4 games in pressures in the NFL. So I think he's one of the betting odds to win Defensive Player of the Year.
And so that's my question. Is it even possible? I mean, is he exceeding expectations? I mean, that's a huge difference. Or is it, hey, once again, thank you for letting us draft him number 2?
Well, they have to thank the Jaguars for that, and taking Trayvon Walker. But yeah, it is just a natural progression. He's, a natural pass rusher, a great teammate, and a great face of the team for the Lions too. I mean, the things that he does outside of the locker room, the charity stuff, visiting hospitals, doing all that kind of stuff, is he's just a great face for the team as a whole too. On top of that, and a pretty good teammate and stuff. So, like, there doesn't seem to be a weak link to his game or to his person so far.
All right, Coach, how about you? Everything we're seeing out of Hutch and Jamo, how do you quantify that? I mean, everyone expected more, but what do you attribute that to, and how do you wrap it up?
Well, I think, we surrounded them with some bodies. That's for sure. We've surrounded coverage guys behind them. We've put guys in front of them. We've created that. But he just works what did he changed his body again? He gained more weight, lost fat, whatever. I mean, the guy's a workaholic, and he's going to be, I mean, JJ Watt's talking about him. I mean, that's a pretty good guy to be talking about, and I think he looks at all those guys and say, I want to be someday in that class. But I don't think it's him as much as saying I want to be in that class, but what his thing is, I want to be part of this Lions organization to be the best that they can be, and he knows that what he does on the field is going to project them into winning. How well he puts pressure on, how well he helps the corners, how well he helps that, and I think he worked on his moves. He's got it. He can run you over now. He can go around you. He can rip. He loves the spin move, and you know what? I would love to look at his percentage that he tried to spin move last year compared to the percentage that he tried to spin move this year. And this year is going to be less. I'll guarantee it, because he's using it when it needs to be used. And I think, and he's gotten smarter. So that's a straighter, it's an upward trend, which should be out of him. It should be an upward trend, and he's doing it. And I don't see him not going up after this year again. I think he's just going to continue to climb and climb and climb until he nobody can block him, and they're going to have to double and triple team him, which is going to open it up for the rest of the guys. So I love it. And on the JMO thing, he just the hamstrings, the injuries, the knee injury. He had the ham last year, right? He hurt his ham last year in preseason, and then of course he had the suspension. He just needed to get that work. Has he jumped higher than we thought? Let's wait till the end of the season on that one, but I'm loving the progression.
I hear you on that, because it is early. And again, I don't think it's a shock to say, hey, these guys are performing really well, and they had the potential to do it. We didn't know if it would happen, but so far what we're seeing through 4 weeks is incredible. And the number of pressures that Hutchinson is getting right now, as James threw those numbers out there, it's not even close. And so that is impacting so many elements of the game. Anything else that surprised you guys so far?
I mean, no, go ahead if you want to go.
No, you're good.
I would say Jake Bates has been a pretty pleasant surprise. He has had the one missed extra point, but aside from that, he's been pretty automatic. Earlier this week, Dan Campbell was saying that he was actually willing to let him try a 73-yarder in the game, but they were just a few yards short of that at before halftime against the Seahawks. So I mean, that's crazy. 73 yards, that's almost 10 yards past the record in the NFL, and he was willing to let him try that. That would have just been absolutely bonkers to see him try that, or even just make it. I mean, that would have just been crazy. And just the defense as a whole. I think we thought it would be improved with the additions to the secondary, but I think it's been better than I think what people even hoped overall. I mean, the Lions can win with their defense, and they still have one of the best offenses in the league.
Yeah, I would say early on that defense, even the secondary, has looked well considering how good of competition, the quality of wide receivers they've been up against, and they've been learning on the fly as they're going. You got the young guys and the new guys all coming together for this new unit. Coach, anything on you for biggest surprises before we flip it over to disappointments?
Well, I mean, you're going to talk about disappointment in a minute by losing Barnes, but the big surprise, and it shouldn't be a surprise, but Rodrigo. I mean, that dude is playing some ball for us right now. And talk about it, the guy comes out of, with the big show, and he's the darling of the Detroit Lions, and everybody loves him. And he starts, and then the next year he becomes second string, and they draft a linebacker to play for him. Yet Barnes gets hurt, he steps in, and he's playing well. He had the sack last week. He's in coverage. Game 3 at 86% of the snaps. He had 62% of the snaps on our last game. He was at 13 and 40. He's at 13 when Barnes played, and now he's doing 86 to 62%. And, again, another guy, that's your depth pieces. You asked earlier about, do we wish some of these rookies would be playing more? If the rookies are playing, we're usually in dire straits or in trouble. And I think that's one of the biggest things. And Rodrigo just did his job. I think he had a couple special team tackles last week. He's doing everything we need of him. And when he does get called on, he does what he's supposed to do. So that's I don't want to say it's a surprise. I guess it's a happy surprise because we knew he had it in him, and thank God he stuck around.
Oh man, that's a guy that oftentimes people forget about because he's taken a different role with the team. But even in the NFC Championship game, you saw him step in and making plays when needed. And so speaks to the depth, the quality of depth on this team. And yeah, just Rodrigo, you still love the guy. And so that's been great to see him do that. Of course, let's go to the disappointments. The Derek Barnes injury, the Marcus Davenport injury. Davenport was playing. He was making an impact when he was in there. I think he played 2 full games for us, or mostly 2 full games. But you saw his presence being felt. So those injuries hit big. What are you guys? What's your reaction on those things, and anything else that's disappointing right now?
Yeah, the thing about Davenport, I mean, you see a lot of people criticizing Brad Holmes for signing a guy like Davenport with an injury history, and it kind of goes along with Mosley but this isn't Madden football. You can't have a Pro Bowler at every position, and you've got to find bargains in free agency. And that's what they did. You've got to gamble on some of these guys, and you've got to hit on some of them, and they've done that in the past. And are they all going to work out? No. But Davenport played pretty well and did exactly what they wanted him to before he got hurt. Maybe he can come back late in the season or for the playoffs, kind of like how supposedly Mosley and Kaminsky could be ready for the playoffs or late in the season this year, which by that point could give them a couple of nice pieces coming back. Hopefully the team is not depleted by then, but you never know. And those guys could play some roles at that point. And the other injuries, to Broderick Martin was disappointing too, because in the preseason he was flashing well, and it looked like things had kind of clicked with him a little bit, and he was doing a lot of good things at defensive tackle, and seemed like they were going to have a really good rotation in there. And you were like, oh, well, he's going to be able to come in and play for a few good games and get a lot of reps until DJ Reader's ready. And then he got that injury in preseason. And if he, Melifonwu getting hurt, which was, as we talked, safety was the one place where we thought they didn't have a whole lot of depth, and him getting hurt takes that even more. But they've been okay so far with it.
Yeah, so far the injury seemed to be the big disappointment for us. I think in general we're pretty happy. There might be a one or two that we're going to touch on here, but James, I want to quickly touch on that Marcus Davenport thing that you brought up, which was Brad Holmes gets criticized for signing him because he's had an injury history. But here's the thing. Somebody asked me this about Emmanuel Mosley because he came off a torn ACL, and then we signed him. He tore his other ACL, and we re-signed him again. And they said, does that bother you? And I said, he didn't tear the same ACL. It's a different injury. And I mean, from my perspective, if it's a different injury, it means it might not be a chronic same problem. And so therefore it could just be a a situation of circumstance. So, Coach, I mean, do you kind of agree with that thought process that, hey, I mean, you've talked about it before. After game one, nobody's 100% anyway. But as also James alluded to, we're not going to have Pro Bowlers with multi-million-dollar contracts at every position as well.
Right. And you sign the guys when they're injured. You don't lose a starting position because you get injured in a game and you're knocked off for one game. It's the same concept. We brought those guys in for a reason. And why not take that bargain? Like James said, it's a bargain. The other thing too is what we don't see is we see a contract. We see a guy that only played, we'll talk about Davenport, that only played two games for us and played well. But what we don't see is him in the locker room. We don't see him on the practice field. We don't hear him telling Pascal, hey, dude, this is what you have to do in this position. Hey, Levi, this is what the guy's, he's a veteran. He's been around. He's seen it all. And so I think, I think the Lions do a ton of that people don't realize that they do bring these guys in that have the experience to help these younger guys. And they can answer questions and they're, and that's what I heard from Davenport was he was utmost. They were always working. Reeder was working with those guys. Davenport was working with those guys. We got some young pups out there, and you got to bring experience in to make sure those young pups become, rabid dogs, I guess is what we want to say.
Well, Jerry, I want to stay with you on this next thing because here is one where I think there is a disappointment from a lot of Lions fans and basically because what we were hoping for at the end of last season and then, hopefully a reinvigoration this season, and that's going to be James Houston. We were expecting more out of him. Some people thought he was on the roster bubble even as training camp went down, and he's had limited time on the field, and when he's been on there, it hasn't always been what fans had hoped for. And this could be a result of his injury from last year, that he's not the same player he was before that injury. Coach, what are you seeing out of Houston, and what are your thoughts on the overall situation?
Well, 14 reps last game. Granted, they had 90 offensive plays, but he still had 14 reps. He jumped off sides, which I think hurt him. I think after that happened, I don't know if he played after that, but I saw some pressures. I saw some bull rushes. Where he at least made QB step up in the pocket. So I still think that's one of those guys the Lions are looking at and going, stop making these mistakes, or can you do this for us? Can you do this for us? Can you do this for us? But they see all that athleticism and they see the ability he has to rush the passer. I think he dropped. I think I saw him drop into pass coverage once for sure in the last game, maybe twice. And he looked okay doing it. So, it may be, that may be one that he's going to, fit in there. Trevor, Lawski got more reps, and that could be he picked up reps because Houston, couldn't do them, and they know that. But Trevor was inside too a little bit, so and he can drop pass coverage. So I think they're going to still run with him. I think this week coming against Dallas will be interesting to see where he's at, which will tell you how he graded out those 14 plays. Excluding the offsides penalty, which, as soon as he did that, I'm like, dude, you can't make mistakes. You got to be perfect. So, but hopefully 14 of those plays or 13 of those plays, he stacked some plays and they're going to keep him around. So, but yeah, it'd be nice to get what we thought we were going to get from him.
James, what are you seeing out of Houston right now?
Yeah, so far, not a lot. In those 14 snaps, he was graded as the Lions' worst player on PFF with a 29 rating. So the worst player on defense for the entire Lions. So he hasn't done enough, and we know that he can do more than this. We've seen it. Is it a matter of that he can't get that bend that he used to be able to get when he was a rookie that got him around those offensive tackles, that they just couldn't get that low? A giant 6'8" offensive tackle like Taylor Decker just can't get his hands low enough to get a guy that had that bend that Houston had. And then he had that, that break last year. And, I don't know that he's gotten it back. And I think that they're just kind of waiting for that to come back with him. We've seen some glimpses here or there. There was a couple plays in the preseason that looked pretty good. He had a nice sack. I think it was against the Giants, in the preseason game that looked pretty good. So I think, right now, I think he's purely just a third down pass rush blitz guy. I don't know that they view him as anything more than that at this point. And like you said, Trevor Nowatzki can do kind of the same things, some of the same things. He's not as much of a blitzer specifically, but he can drop into coverage and do a lot of those other things better than Houston can. So he's a sub package player right now who you put in on obvious passing downs and say go get the quarterback, and that's what he is.
And Trevor actually got some pressures last week as well in his limited play. So, the Lions went after him and put a waiver claim in on Trevor for a reason. And so you might continue to see more involvement from Nowatzki. Well, guys, let's move over to areas of concern before the season started. I think the two areas we were concerned most about was wide receiver 3 and safety, and maybe kicker as well because we had the Badgley injury. Let's start with wide receiver 3. I was concerned about that most of offseason once Josh Reynolds left, thinking DPJ would step into the role. We also heard about Antoine Green, who was trending that way before his injury. But I think all three of us had a big collective sigh of relief when Tim Patrick and Allen Robinson signed to our practice squad. They cost us 0 draft picks, and they did not cost us to overpay for contracts. And what we're seeing right now out of Tim Patrick is exactly what we want out of a number 3 receiver. A big guy who can catch 2 to 4 passes a game, pull coverage away, block. And so I'm feeling really good about wide receiver 3 since the season started. How are you guys feeling on that? Coach, we'll start with you, then we'll go to James.
He's going to put his face in there to make a block, as we saw last week. And I think that's what the Lions are looking for. He's a bigger body. He ran a DB over on a catch.
Yes, he did.
I mean, I think you're right. I think you hit it. We got a 6'3" dude that wants to prolong his career. He wants to prove all the doubters wrong, and he wants to show the Broncos they made a major mistake letting him go. And guess what? We scooped him up. Just keep playing and stay healthy, big dog.
James, how about you? You feeling pretty good about that wide receiver 3 position now?
Yeah, he's basically in one game plus of playing, seeing him been what we hoped Donovan Peoples-Jones would be, maybe better. If God forbid Jameson Williams or Amon-Ra St. Brown get hurt, is he number 1 or 2 receiver? I don't know about that, but who would have been on that roster? Would Donovan Peoples-Jones have been? No. Would Antoine Green have been? Probably not. So there's still a little bit of depth concern there, but I'm not sure that Allen Robinson has anything left in the tank, but they brought him in for a reason, and they elevated him to the active roster last week. Not just a regular elevation from the practice squad. They actually signed him to the 53. So that tells you that they saw enough to bring him in and bring him up. And whether that is dependent on how Isaiah Williams is doing, we'll see. When Isaiah Williams is back, I think that he's the number 4 or 5 guy over Allen Robinson. But it's definitely nice to have those depth pieces.
All right. And the other area was safety. And, you guys have already talked about that with the contributions of Brandon Joseph. I'm going to say I'm still concerned about safety only due to depth. If he is out longer, because they just put him on IR after not going on IR. Obviously, we should have Branch back to go with Kirby as well. But so that gives you 3 people there. And so my only concern is what the concern was before the season started, which is depth. And that is, hey, if he comes back and we're 4 deep, I'm feeling really good. But going 3 deep, because then if there would have been an injury that happened in the game against Seattle, you would have had to bring up the next guy, which there might have been a little bit of a drop-off there. How are you guys feeling about safety right now? I mean, you already talked about it, that our depth has shown, but are you concerned that if he doesn't come back, that we might need some help there, or are you guys feeling okay?
I wish we had somebody in the system. But and again, who played last week? Joseph, right?
Yeah, Kirby and Brandon.
Yeah, Brandon, thank you. And I like him, and I think he's doing well. He's not iffy. He's definitely not Branch, but I thought he played well. I mean, I think we did some good stuff. He was put into a hard pressure, especially as well as they threw the ball and how many times they threw the ball. So, iffy's the big one. Going into the season, we were concerned with it because we weren't sure. Then you start looking and going, okay, we got Iffy, we got Joseph, we got Branch is going to be back there now. Now we got Iffy backing those guys up. We can use them in different packages. And so, but I'm not as concerned with that because I think with our front seven, AG can go to more pressure concepts and not put as much pressure on those guys, and we still got Davis that can play. We can put him in one of those other guys in the slot and play slot corner and come up there. So yeah, it'd be nice again with our two starting safeties. I think they're as good as anybody in the league. There's definitely a huge fall off, but it's a long season, and the iffy thing is going to be the big one. And the Lions, it doesn't seem like the Lions are concerned that he's not going to be back. So let's run with that this next quarter, and then we'll have to come back on that one.
All right, well, let's move over to area of strength then. What looks to be a good piece of strength right now? I want to give a shout out. I mean, the offensive line still looks like a strength, and I want to give a shout out to Kevin Zeitler because I think he has fit in and been the guy we had hoped we were going to see when the Lions signed him to that offensive line. So, and Coyote Awashika, we talked about him last game. We've got some great depth on the offensive line. And so, to me, I'm giving the offensive line a continued piece of strength picking up from last year. Coach, you want to add to that? And then, James, tell us what your thought is. What are your areas of strength that's making you feel good about the Lions?
The team. I look at it. Yeah, the offensive line, our running backs, our receivers. I think the strength is we got those 4 games in. We figured some things out. We got some people healthy. We lost some people. As long as we stay healthy, we have a ton of strength. And everywhere you look at, it's going to be tough. Wright has caught probably more. He caught more passes in his first 4 games in his career in the last, because if you're going to take Laporte away, the big dog, he can catch too. And so I'm pleased with the whole thing. I don't see anything lacking.
All right, James, I said the offensive line's a pretty nice strength that is continued from last year. Jerry said the whole team's a strength. So what do you got?
Yeah, the offensive line has played pretty great, especially considering they've had to shuffle things around a little bit recently. Running backs, Montgomery and Gibbs have been the best 1-2 combo in the league this season, I think. And if you throw Baki into that later in the season, I think he's a dangerous player. And if you need another safety, you've always got Baki there too.
Yeah, good call.
There you go, versatility. And another strength, you talked about those running backs. Here's a name we haven't said, and we're over a half hour in. Jared Goff picked up some yardage on the ground. Yeah. I mean, and he even caught a pass if we need a 4th or 5th receiver. All kidding aside there, though. And Jared Goff's the strength of this team, guys, as well. I mean, it falls into the categories you guys have said, which is, all these elements and stuff. But we got to say his name because after going 18 for 18 and all the boo birds that have thrown out stuff at him in the last year or two, and people who have continued to put him down and say he's not quite elite, not quite a top 10 quarterback, he's good enough for Detroit. He's good enough for us.
Absolutely. I mean, I think you look at the Lions and you look at the parallels between Jared Goff's performance and the Lions, and when he doesn't have turnovers, the Lions win. It's pretty much a straight line parallel. If he doesn't turn the ball over a bunch, the Lions win because they have good enough pieces around him, and he's been pretty stellar. I mean, 18 for 18, something that's never been done in NFL history. I don't know. You can say a lot for somebody who a couple years ago people thought was just a complete throw-in in the trade.
All right, well, we need to put our objective hats on now, okay? We need to be honest and say, okay, what could be a vulnerability with this team, right? Anyone listening, they're like, where could there be a flaw? Because we think great starting players, great depth. We've seen it come up. And the only one that comes to me is injury, all right, is the injury part. And we're seeing that all around the NFL pretty big right now. So, Coach, we'll start with you. Is there an area that could be vulnerable that you could see?
I would say a little bit on the offensive line with Glasgow on the left guard spot. They are doing a great job. He stepped in at center. We had our guard last week did a great job too at stepping in for Glasgow. So I think that's one of the ones I want to work out. And what I've been seeing is the teams that run games on the defensive line is where we've had a little bit of problems with. And I think that'll come with these guys working more and more and more together. And I'm sure they'll have a great, with a great off week, being able to pick those things up. So that would be one of my concerns there. In getting Goff hurt in a situation like that. But that's the only one I see on that. I don't. And again, if we have an injury at any one of our skill positions, are we going to fall off? I don't believe so, because I just think there's so many different pieces. We can go tight end, we can go wide out, we can run the ball more, we can do this. But I think that the offensive line position from that guard standpoint of Glasgow on the right side, and he's playing well, but he's had some concerns, and I think that's one. And I just don't think he likes the left side as much. And it's hard, man, if you're a right side guy. But he stepped up at center last week, unbelievable. So we know he's got it in him. So that's the only thing that's the only concern I have.
All right, James, how about you? Any potential areas of vulnerability for the Lions?
Yeah, I think I like kind of piggyback on what Jerry said. I think it's injuries. I other than that, I don't see a whole lot of weakness on this team. If injuries continue to mount, but they're gonna do that for everybody around the league, unless the Lions get like a ridiculous amount of injuries, or heaven forbid you get like Penny Sewell or Decker or somebody major like that on the offensive line. I don't know that they have another person that can come in and consistently play tackle behind those two, on an every down basis. I mean, you have some guys that can come in a little bit here or there, but I mean, so that would be my one. I guess I would be like backup tackle.
Fair enough. And we're seeing like people contribute. Like, look at Jack Campbell, the draft pick from last year at linebacker, where people are like, oh my goodness, we're so deep at linebacker. We shouldn't have taken Campbell. We should have taken a wide receiver in that position, right? Well, he's getting more play time right now. And I think you're going to continue to see more of that, of him growing and filling in for that area. And so you guys have talked about it, though, the injury thing and the depth filling in for that. I don't really want to talk about this next part, but I feel like we have to. This is almost like when Coach and I did the trade Jared Goff for Lamar Jackson episode. We didn't want to do it, but people just kept talking about it. And I've had people, legit friends of mine, texting me, is this real? The Lions are going to trade for Devontae Adams and Max Crosby. And the answer is no, and no, and no to no, because for so many reasons, is it worth getting into? Is it salary cap? Is it draft picks? Is it how do they fit with the team? Is it this isn't the Lions' MO? And so, we'll start with you, James, and then Coach, go right to you. Why will this never happen? Let's just start with that. Why will this not happen?
Brad Holmes. And simply, Brad Holmes knows that his strength is drafting players. So he's not going to want to give up those draft picks, especially high ones. The highest draft pick that we've seen him give up in 3 years was a third rounder for Carlton Davis. And that was a late third rounder, I believe, mid to late third rounder for Carlton Davis, for a starting NFL corner for a team that needed another starting corner. And that was all the higher he was willing to go. If you're talking a package of Max Crosby and Devontae Adams, which is stupid. It was started by a sarcastic Twitter account that's not a parody Twitter account. You'd be talking multiple first round picks. The starting price for Devontae Adams is a second plus, is what they're saying. And Max Crosby is somebody they're not going to move. They've signed him to a long-term contract. They're building that team around defense. He's the centerpiece of that defense. He's their Aiden Hutchinson. They're not moving him.
Exactly. And you've seen other teams make these high-priced free agent trades and signings, and how well do they always work out, which is why the Lions have always gone with that old adage, we're going to build our guys up and we're going to keep the guys we build. And I see Coach nodding his head right there. He's like, yeah, that's how you build a winning team. I mean, last time I checked, the Jets have a losing record right now. Okay? And so that's just one example. But here's the thing. What position could the Lions make a trade for at the trade deadline? They did win a wide receiver last year because they wanted a little bit more insurance depth, but they didn't give up a first, second, or third round pick for it. I personally think there's a chance they'll make a trade at the trade deadline, but it will probably be for a person that a lot of people haven't heard of, or they fit in a depth spot due to an injury that might happen over the next 4 to 5 weeks. Coach, James, you guys want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think the biggest thing with them, and you guys both said it, they're going to build within, they're going to develop within, and they're going to make sure that locker room understands nobody has to look over their back as long as they do their job. If you don't do your job and you give, they're going to give you probably 2, 3 strikes, and you're probably going to be out and they're going to move somebody in. So that's where the trade would come from. I think, the only trade would be if Pascal and those guys don't continue to grow as that guy opposite of Hutch, Levi and him and Houston, and whether it's Nawaz, whatever. If we don't have somebody that's gonna take that pressure off right now, I think we do, because last time I checked, Hutch was like 17 pressures ahead of everybody else, and he led the league in sacks. And Rodrigo's got a sack, and McNeil's got a sack, and I think Reeder's got a sack. So I think that's what you're going to look at. But and it could be a second string piece, or somebody could come in. But I think the injury concept of what happens up to the trade deadline is going to make a big difference. Or they're going to keep their money and take care of the people in the locker room.
Makes sense, Coach. James?
Yeah, right now the only one you mentioned before, the Jets, not that great. They brought in a lot of pieces or whatever. One of those pieces I think that maybe you could look at if they don't think that they're getting enough production opposite Aiden Hutchinson would be Hassan Reddick. Yeah. He's holding out. He wants an extension. There's concern about that. He's already 30. He's not in the Davenport mold of defensive end that they want a big defensive end to go on that side. He's only 240. But he is an elite pass rusher and is incredibly durable. I don't think he's missed an NFL game in his career at 30 years old. He has a $14 million price tag this season, and he wants more than that, which is why the Jets haven't re-signed him. But he's holding out too. So he hasn't played it down for them this year. And the Jets got him for a 3rd-round pick from the Eagles. So his asking price has to be going down with the holdout. So if you call up the Jets and say, hey, we'll give you a 5th in James Houston, maybe they listen. I don't know. Maybe they don't.
But then you're also going to have to pay him on an extended contract, or he's not going to play for you this year. That's the tough thing. It's like when the Rams went and traded for Von Miller, they got like an expiring contract, and they gave a late round pick, and they got a nice boost for their defense. So Lions fans, we'll see what happens around the trade deadline. I think Campbell and Holmes will thoroughly vet where the team's at and if there's anybody that can bring in to help them. But I'm not expecting big-name blockbuster moves because that's not their MO. And they want to make sure this team is built stone on top of stone so that we're ready for next year as well. But before next year comes, we got to finish talking about this year. We're running a little out of time here, but we need to talk about the NFC North as a whole right now. Before the season, we all said it would be the toughest division in football, and it might just be the only division in football where every team has a winning record. Minnesota's 5-0, Lions are 3-1, the Packers and Bears are 3-2. I'm going to say it, I picked the Vikings to finish last in the division this year, okay? But I also said to my best friend who's a huge Vikings fan that don't underestimate what Aaron Jones can do for that team, and I expect them to be much better. If J.J. McCarthy had not gotten hurt, I would have not put the Vikings in last. So I did definitely undervalue what Sam Darnold can do. But a 5-0 start by the Vikings, and they beat some good clubs along the way, so you don't want to discount that. The Packers been without their starting quarterback multiple games and still won. And then the Bears, a loaded team with a rookie quarterback who is evidently making progress. And so how are you feeling, James? And then we'll come to you, Coach, about the competition in the NFC North.
Well, I'm feeling good. I mean, about where the Lions stand, but Lions fans have to understand that the Minnesota Vikings are very for real. I didn't think that they were going to be. They had a bunch of things happen in the offseason that looked like it was going to be bad. But this team has come together. Their defense has been elite so far this season through 5 games. I mean, 76 points is all they've given up in 5 games. That's crazy. They have the highest point differential in the entire NFC. So they're going to be a problem. The division from top to bottom is good. No, there's no weakness in this division. The Bears are good. The Packers are good. The Vikings have been great so far, and the Lions have been pretty darn good, aside from stubbing their toe against the Buccaneers. They very easily could be 4-0. So it's going to be a battle right down to the end. And who did they play last week of the season? Minnesota Vikings.
Coach, how you feeling about the division?
Well, black and blue division's back, and they're definitely, you got some great coaches there. I mean, they downgraded the Chicago coach for years, but I always thought he did a pretty good job. But I never the two in Green Bay and LaFleur and the Minnesota. I can't think of his name.
Kevin O'Connell.
Yeah, thank you. Friend, guy that I worked with at Saginaw, worked for him. Did statistical stuff for him, and just said he was a great guy and just loved doing work and stuff for him. And so I think you knew that was going to come, and then Flores is a great coach, and Flores built his defense on the pieces that he had, and he brought the people in to fill into those pieces. Does that sound familiar, guys? And that's what he's done with that. So, they're for real. You're 5-0. You're not 5-0 for any reason. You don't. I'm not going to talk about who they beat or who they didn't beat, or they beat Houston, they pounded Houston. So it's there. It'll be interesting to see when we get in, into our division play with us against all those guys. We knew it. You have to win those league games, of course, and the overall record's going to come into play. We may get in as a wild card team. Who knows? But I think there's going to be at least 2 out of this division, and I can't wait till we all start playing each other and find out how really good everybody is when you face our defense and our offense. Because I'm not sure the teams that these guys are beating have both sides of the ball like we do.
Yeah, I saw something on Twitter today, and it said the last time the Vikings started 5-0, they had a bye week in week 6. Did you guys see that?
Yeah, I think I texted that to you today.
And they finished the season 8-8. Now, I'm not saying it's going to happen again this year, because I said last offseason I hope somebody would hire Brian Flores as their head coach, because I saw what he was doing that defense over there, Coach, and you were half the time I saw it because you were telling me about it, but you're spot on with it. And so, but you also talked about, hey, those teams haven't played the Lions yet. In fact, every team that has played the Lions this year has lost the following week. I mean, Seattle just lost to the New York Giants. And so it's happened every single game, every single week, that if they play the Lions, some people are calling it the Lions hangover, like you're still recovering from that game. Even if it was a win for Tampa, they lost the following week. So, all right. So some sad news to pass along here is a longtime Lions quarterback, Greg Landry, passed away at age 77. He played for more than a decade for the Detroit Lions, mostly in the 1970s. He had nearly 1,000 completions, 12,000 yards passing, and 80 touchdowns. And again, when you factor that into the time and era that he played, that means something. And so, again, he passed away at age 77. James, you have some more information on Greg Landry?
Yeah, he was one of the guys who was at the game last week as the Lions had their homecoming. They had close to 100 former players there at the game, and he was one of them. So sad to hear of his passing not too long after that. For a lot of us older Lions fans, he's the first quarterback we remember.
Yeah, I was surprised when you told me that his name was on the list there. And thoughts for his family. Nice time to take a moment and remember him and what he's meant for the franchise. All right, well, guys, we'll have the Lions versus Cowboys preview coming up this week. We'll get to that soon. Any final thoughts on the first quarter of the season or the outlook for the Lions as we get out of here? James?
Raise your hand if you had the Washington Commanders as the highest scoring team in the NFL through 5 weeks. Nobody's going to be able to raise their hand. Nobody, not even if you were a front office person with the Washington Commanders.
Yeah, that's a good reminder. There's things we don't expect. I mean, if you look at the NFL standings right now, did you have the 49ers sitting where they are right now? I mean, here we are into week 5 and the 49ers are 2-3. The Rams are 1-4. I mean, you didn't see these things coming, but we never do.
The NFL.
That it is. Coach, any final thoughts before we get out of here?
All good. Just going to get ready to watch the Cowboys.
All right. Scouting them out for next week. Folks, thank you so much for tuning in. You can find more episodes and content at notthesameoldlions.com. Tell your friends and family about the show. Like and comment on socials. Please subscribe regardless of your listening platform. And until next time, stay gritty, my friends.
If you're a facilities manager at a warehouse and your HVAC system goes down, it can turn up the heat, literally. But don't sweat it, Grainger has you covered. Grainger offers over 1 million industrial-grade products for all your operations, including warehouse HVAC maintenance. And even better, they offer access to experts and fast delivery, so you and your warehouse can both keep your cool. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.